We might be 48 hours away from knowing who the next Seahawks head coach is going to be. Off the back of the championship games where both Baltimore and Detroit were eliminated, the Seahawks now have no restrictions to go and speak to Ben Johnson. They're doing that on Monday. They're going to speak to Mike Macdonald on Tuesday. And the general feeling, if you listen to people, listen to the reporters, is that with both of these jobs, it more than likely is going to become between Johnson, Macdonald and Dan Quinn for the two vacancies left with the Commanders and with the Seahawks. My position has never changed throughout this process. And without wanting to go over old ground again, I'll just do it very, very quickly. I think with the way that the Seahawks have built their roster, with their investment in the skill positions, paying DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett a lot of money and Geno Smith, spending a first-round pick on Jackson Smith and Jigba, 2 second-round picks on running back, spending a top 10 pick on a pass-protecting left tackle. Everything is geared towards being an offensive-minded team, similar to the Detroit Lions. I think it would be a seamless transition to put Ben Johnson in the head coaching role, to challenge him to get the most out of the weapons, to challenge him to make Geno Smith essentially as effective as Jared Goff, which he has been and I presume would continue to be if he's still on the roster. I think that would enable the Seahawks to be pretty good next year. And that's really what I think is best for the team in the short and long term. And then, the defense needs some work. I think that you would have an opportunity to go and coax Ejiro Evero from the Panthers. Why would he want to stay in Carolina? It's a hot mess. I think there'd be a way to go and bring him to Seattle, if not him, maybe Patrick Graham, and create a really good coaching setup where you can improve the defense. You know, if it is Giro Vero, then you could certainly look at the work that he's done with Denver and Carolina and say, this is a man who has not been blessed with huge amounts of blue chip players and has been able to produce a good defense. So, I think overall that would give the Seahawks a chance to be relatively competitive next season with the idea of growing and progressing. People say the offensive line's not as good in Seattle, but two of Detroit's guards are free agents. You could potentially go and sign them. You have got a top 16 pick, or you've got the 16th overall pick in a good O-line draft. It's a fantastic offensive line draft. And you've got 2 third-round picks where I think the O-line depth is going to stretch into that range as well. So you've got an opportunity to do some work on the offensive line. To me, it just makes perfect sense, and I think it gives the Seahawks the best possible chance to try and emulate the Lions, who should be in the Super Bowl today. And they're not because they cocked it up in the third quarter. But, when I look at the Lions and the way that they played the Niners, I look at the way that Ben Johnson coached his team, I am thinking, yes, you can be competitive with the Niners playing that way, and yes, you can be competitive in the NFC, and I think that's what the aim should be. Now, there's been all the talk of him being a shoo-in for the Commanders. We heard Adam Schefter saying that not so fast. He said that on Sunday and then said that they, were going to interview other people. And I felt that was doing Washington a solid because as of today, they've not even interviewed one person who would fulfill their obligation to the Rooney Rule. Mike Macdonald, who they're speaking to today, could potentially take one of those away. And if they appoint him, they wouldn't need to speak to anybody else. But apart from that, they've still got work to do in terms of getting interviews done for the Rooney Rule. And I thought that was a solid from Schefter because they were going to bring in a couple of guys. They didn't want to put them off going for an interview that was seen to be futile. And I thought that's what was happening there. I'm not as sure about that today because Schefter came out and did a piece on Pat McAfee saying that essentially he would not bet against that. Well, he said that it's felt that Johnson to come to Washington and Quinn to Seattle were like the 2 big favoured moves. And he said he wouldn't bet against at least one of those being wrong, if not 2. And that takes it on a little bit further. That genuinely, I thought, was pouring cold water on the possibility. It no longer felt like, well, the Commanders are just keeping an open mind about things. That was borderline predicting it won't happen. So I still think it is an open race, and I don't think the Seahawks would necessarily be wasting their time with Ben Johnson in Detroit today if it wasn't an open race. So I retain some hope that they can get it done. Quite frankly, I hope that they meet Ben Johnson today, give him the hard sell, give him everything that he wants, and that maybe even by tomorrow or tonight we know that they've got the job done. Go and get it done, John. I think it'd be a fantastic appointment, and like I say, that's been the guy that I've wanted all along. And I think there's, even if you don't want him or you want Mike Macdonald or somebody else instead, I think that's fine. But I don't think you can argue with sort of the ideas presented as to why I think Johnson would be the best appointment. And that's before we even get in. I've talked about the personnel and the scheming, which I think has been impressive. I mean, look, the work he's done in Detroit, took over an offense that Dan Campbell and Anthony Lynn led 29th best in per DVOA in the league. Top 10 the following year, top 5 the year after that. Amon-Ra St. Brown, third most productive receiver in the league. Running backs, 24 total touchdowns. Sam Laporta, isn't he an all-pro? 10 touchdowns, led all tight ends in the league. This is a really good performance from Ben Johnson as a coordinator, and I think he's the kind of guy that could make that transition to a head coach. Having watched a lot of his press conferences and a lot of stuff like that, and the way that people talk about him, including other coaches. So I think he's the ideal candidate. And then there's the other side of it, that you never have to worry about losing your play caller or your offensive play caller. If you are going to draft a quarterback soon, this year or next year, you never have to worry about losing that chemistry between your main play caller and the quarterback. It just ticks every freaking box. And it wouldn't surprise me if he was the main target all along and they just intend to go and land their guy. I've been put off that thought a lot by all of the smoke about the Commanders. If you challenged me to put $10 on where's Ben Johnson going to go, I'd still slap it down on the Commanders just because of all that smoke. But I have to say that maybe I'll get my hopes up a little bit, and that's always a dangerous thing to do, based on what Schefter was saying there. Just sort of putting a little bit of extra cold water on the idea that Johnson to the Commanders is a done deal. So if it's not him, if he does ultimately go to the Commanders, that leaves you with the other two guys that I mentioned at the start, Mike Macdonald and Dan Quinn. So what do I think is going on here? I don't think the Seahawks know an awful lot about Mike Macdonald. They didn't interview him through the first, for whatever reason. Everyone's talked about the rules. Initially, it felt like, they didn't have time to get that interview in. That's what Corbin Smith was reporting per some of the rules that he found. But then I've seen other people like Michael Sean Dugar saying, no, they could have got that done in that week, and they didn't. So I don't really know what to make of that, whether it means anything or not. But they haven't spoken to him. He's not been in the NFL or the coaching world that long that John would know a load of people who could go, oh yeah, look, I'll vouch for him. It's just not where their sources are. It's not like he's working in Green Bay or something like that, or with the Chiefs and Andy Reid. So I think they have got to get to know this guy. They've got to get a feel for him, got a feel for what he's about, learn about how he would lead. And the reason that I think Dan Quinn's name is still being mentioned, and it has today, by Michael Sean Dugar on KJR, by Brady Henderson on 710, by some other reporters who just keep saying, just keep an eye on that, I saw the Hawk blogger had done an article on Quinn, and they're curious about that timing as well. Maybe you know something. So there was a few things that worked together to make me think, okay, we still need to take Quinn a little bit seriously. It's not a done deal that Quinn's not part of this. And I just wonder if they can't get Johnson, if they speak to Mike Macdonald and are just thinking, no, he's not ready to be our head coach, are they just going to turn to Quinn and then say, well, we went through a thorough search and Dan Quinn was the guy all along? Maybe. I still think that's possible. I think that's where Quinn is right now. He's probably like first reserve or second reserve. If they can't coach Johnson, and if they don't think Macdonald's ready, maybe they turn to Quinn. The other side of that is maybe they are completely convinced by Mike Macdonald and they bring him in and he's the new head coach. But we spent a lot of time talking about Mike Macdonald as well recently. When I've done articles saying, just think about this and think about that. It's not because I don't want Mike Macdonald, I don't like him or don't admire what he's done at Baltimore. It's just, for me, and I've even seen people saying stuff like, people have sent me emails about this saying, well, you were really high on Mike Macdonald a few weeks ago, and now what I was saying a few weeks ago is if you're going to hire a defensive coach, go and get the one who's got the number one defense. Don't just stick with Pete Carroll or go and get Dan Quinn. That's kind of what I was saying, and I stand by those comments. And the reason why I've written some of the things that I have written recently is purely because I don't think people have really focused on a few things that need to be considered about the way that the Ravens offense made it so the defense only ever played 88 snaps when they were training in a game, and stuff like that does matter when you're like coming together with this kind of thing. Lamar Jackson was the MVP. He's going to be the MVP. He's obviously had a huge contributing factor. The 20 years of the Ravens, knowing what they want and the success they've had on defense. They've consistently been great on defense with like the odd season here or there, but apart from that, they've been great on defense through Rex Ryan, Chuck Pagano, Dean Pease, Wink Martindale. Now, Mike Macdonald, it seems like they are very good at building defense, and their coordinators just kind of slot it, and if they fit the Ravens' way, they can make it work. So I think these are things that I've had to talk about, but I think he's been very impressive. I like the way that he speaks. I know they were talking about this on 710 earlier. Maybe he's a bit introverted, but I don't really mind that. I don't think you have to be a chest thumping type of coach. Clearly, his players respect him. The second half adjustments in the Chiefs game, very impressive. He kind of knows how to change and adapt during a game, which is vital. I think that he could end up being a very interesting appointment. There'd be a bit of an unknown there to sort of keep us guessing over the next few months. What is this going to look like? Which is always interesting. So I do think there are things about him that appeal. I also think, who the heck's going to run his offense? Are they going to bring Mike Kafka from the Giants? Is that good enough for you guys? Does that excite you? The thought of Mike Kafka being essentially the head honcho on offense, and if he does a reasonable job, like Dave Canales did a reasonable job, he didn't do an amazing job. I think they were like the 20th best offense via DVOA. He's parlayed that into the Panthers job. If Kafka does well for a year, is he going to go? And then what? You're living in that world again. And is he even dynamic enough to make a great offense and get the most out of the weapons, which is something that Shane Waldron and Pete Carroll couldn't do. These are little things that I just, they give me little pause for thought. And the other thing is, how do you translate the success from Baltimore to Seattle when Seattle's defense is, is it going to take you 2 or 3 years to build Seattle's defense up to be something akin to what the Ravens are? Is he able, Mike Macdonald, to come in and just, with a couple of additions maybe, or whether you use that 16th pick or something, to suddenly make a great defense? Can you do that? Maybe. But I think the pathway to Ben Johnson turning the offense into a top 5 offense and getting a complementary defense is the road's a lot shorter than Mike Macdonald coming in and turning the Seahawks defense into like a top 5 unit, whilst also having a great offense. And there's plenty of teams out there I mentioned, like Vegas, are an example of that. The Jaguars, the Jets, the Patriots. There's a few teams who ranked very highly on defense, but their offense is just terrible, and therefore they had terrible records. So I do worry a little bit about that, and I worry about that with Quinn as well. I just, for me, I've always wanted to go offense and try something different. We had Pete Carroll for 14 years. The idea of having 14 years of Pete Carroll and then going to another defensive head coach doesn't really fill me with much excitement. But I prefer Macdonald over Quinn. Even if it's just for the pure unknown of Macdonald, I prefer that. I think with Quinn, it just feels average. It feels mediocre. It feels 8 wins, 9 wins, 10 wins, and a first-round playoff loss. I think his success in Atlanta with Kyle Shanahan, you can't just park Shanahan from that. You have to acknowledge that Kyle Shanahan, who's now got to 2 Super Bowls with the Niners and reached 2 other NFC Championship games, could win a Super Bowl this year. It's a freaking great coach, whether you like the Niners or not. And he drove that Atlanta offense to just an unbelievable level. Matt Ryan was the freaking MVP in the NFL that year. This is not. I don't really give Quinn that much. I know it's always the head coach, but it was Shanahan and Ryan and Julio Jones and all of those guys that drove that team to the Super Bowl. And I think apart from that, what was he, 24 and 29 without Shanahan in Atlanta? I just think that unless the teams that he's on have amazing personnel, the LOB, Micah Parsons, Kyle Shanahan, I just don't see him being anything more than average. So I prefer the unknown of the Macdonald, which is versus the known of what I think is the known of Quinn, which is just not going to be that exciting. So that's where we're at. I want to believe that John Schneider's going to pull a rabbit out of a hat here, having moved on from Pete Carroll, just go and get what would be a really exciting hire. That for me would be Ben Johnson. Either way, it feels like by Wednesday we're going to know. Like I say, I hope that they speak to Johnson tonight. They don't think they can cancel their other interviews. They get the deal done with him. It's announced. They made a pitch like the Falcons did to Raheem Morris. We don't want to let you out of the room. We want you to sign with us. Here's your money. Here's your everything that you need. Join us. I hope that happens. I hope it's significant that they're meeting Johnson before the Commanders. I just hope that happens. I hope I turn this video off and I see it on Twitter and I have to do another video, quite frankly, or a live stream. That's what I'm hoping for. If not, they'll speak to Mike Macdonald tomorrow and then the process is going to come to an end. They're going to either need an answer from one of those 2 guys and go for the other one, or they're going to have to turn to, or get an answer and it's a positive answer. If it's not, turn to the other one. And if they're not impressed for whatever reason with these guys, or neither of them want the job, then it could be Dan Quinn. That feels where we're at. Let me know what you think, Seahawks fans, in the comments section. Don't forget to check out SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. We'll have a lot of Senior Bowl stuff this week as well. Best place for your draft content, best place for your Seahawks content. Check out SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Tons of articles on there. Blink and you'll miss one. There's so much content on there at the minute. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment in the comment section. Until next time, bye for now.